That was the Duchess Hospital, and they are actually the ones we're talking about right now. Remember, they came and told us about some surgeries they were having, you know, and they were proud, very proud to tell us that the vice president actually had his surgery at their hospital. Well, they have other things coming up, and they're here today to talk about this new thing that they have. They have this waiting list initiative, which the CEO is here to tell us about. Welcome, Dr. Tokunbo Shitobe.
Thank you for having me, Alara. It's been a year since I last sat in this chair.
A year already?
How many cruises have you been on between then and now?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Would you all give me a break?
No, we're not giving you any break, because every time you take a break, you take a cruise.
Dr. Shitobe.
Having disarmed you.
The waiting list initiative is what we're here to talk about.
Of course.
Okay. So you can cruise, you know. Anyway, you were saying something. Go ahead.
Do carry on.
So, tell us about this initiative, waiting list initiative.
Right, okay, so it's the Duchess waiting list initiative for life-saving open heart surgery. Permit me to...
It's only for open heart surgery?
Well, to begin with, but it's for all complex surgical procedures. But
okay.
Allow me to explain it by using a practical example. So let me tell you a bit about Precious. Precious is a very bright 12-year-old girl, very precocious in SS1, actually, who was born with what we call an aneurysm of the ascending aorta. The aorta is the largest artery in the body. It trunks straight from the left ventricle. Now, a normal size aorta at that age is about 2.5 centimeters. When it reaches about 4 centimeters, it's dilated. If it reaches 5, it's an aneurysm. It needs surgery. Beyond that, there's a 10% risk of rupture per centimeter per year. Precious has an aneurysm of 8 centimeters.
Whoa. God.
And it was literally squashing her heart. Now, the good news is that yesterday at the Duchess Hospital, there was groundbreaking open heart surgery. Dr. Nzewi, Professor Falashe, and the cardiothoracic team successfully repaired that aneurysmal dilatation. It's unheard of anywhere in the world, actually, at that age, particularly. So this is really good news. Now, that was made possible because of the waiting list initiative. She originally presented at the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital about 6 weeks ago. She's been managed there between them and us over the last 6 weeks. The transfer was made across about a few days ago, and the operation was performed at the Duchess Hospital successfully yesterday. This is a completely combined effort between the Duchess Hospital, Lagos State University Teaching Hospital. What that means is what we're actually doing is that we are moving patients who would otherwise have had to wait lengthy periods of time in the public sector across to the private sector, so they can have their surgical procedures, beginning with open heart surgery, at no greater cost to them than they would have had to pay in the public sector. And what it means to them, particularly, is that they can use all of the wonderful facilities and expertise that we have at the Duchess in the private sector, and we give that to the benefit of the masses who would otherwise have had to suffer for a lengthy period of time. So that, in a nutshell, is what the waiting list initiative is.
Is this some kind of corporate social responsibility thing, or who's paying for this?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing that I will say is that as a responsible organization, and we are the direct beneficiaries of tons of funding and support from the central bank and the Bank of Industry, we have a responsibility to pass that on. So the onus is on us, really, to reach out into the public sector to build these bridges. We also ensure that we try very hard to reach into the third sector as well as corporate organizations. So it's a real collaborative effort, and that really is how we are going to be able to afford the cost of complex healthcare and surgical procedures in this country, considering the fact that healthcare is chronically underfunded.
What gave birth to this concept?
Right. Okay. Again, let me paint a bit of context around this. Average life expectancy in this country is about 55. The median age is about 18. That means half of the population under the age of 18 years. Per capita spend on healthcare is about $70 per person. Compare that with the average OECD country, that's about $11,000. So there isn't enough funding going into healthcare. HMO premiums can just about pay for decent primary care, but it doesn't really extend into secondary and tertiary care. So the grown-up question is, how precisely do we pay for healthcare in this country? Huge proportion of patients are in the private sector. Tertiary care, facilities like ours account for less than 0.5% of the total healthcare provision in the country. So how do we give the masses the benefit of this wonderful service? Well, it's us. We have to go and build the bridges, find ways in which we can bring money in from the private sector, from the corporate sector, and deliver, pass these services on to the patients. So it really has come out of the need to pay for complex healthcare on behalf of the population.
And I'm sorry, this may not be a question you want to answer, but a sizable number of people watching you right now holds the opinion that some medical practitioners in public hospitals put cogs in the wheel so that they can direct them to their own private interests. How then what kind of partnership do you get from the practitioners, not just the institution now, but from the practitioners within, these facilities in the public sector?
Okay. All right. So the Duchess Hospital is a collaborative project. We set out from day one to work collaboratively with hospitals and practitioners in the public sector. So we have, for example, a memorandum of understanding with the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital that allows us to cross-fertilize teaching and training, expertise, knowledge, capacity building. And what that does is that it gives us a chance to build a governance framework. There's an accreditation process. We have a responsibility to treat and to deliver care to the public. So there's a gateway there that we man very, very closely. And we find that once the governance is in place, practitioners really want to practice responsibly. But to answer your question directly, yes, there probably is a lot of moral hazard out there. It's human nature. But we do our best to ensure that none of those practices seep into our hospital.
Okay. Now, how do you select the people on the waiting list? How many people are on the waiting list? Who comes up with the waiting list?
Okay. So, given the resources that exist in the public sector, let's take open heart surgery, for example. We have a partnership with LASUF. They're doing some amazing work, but the capacity they have can probably only allow them to do 2 or 3 procedures every month.
Wow.
In the last few weeks, within the first few weeks of the program, we were able to do 12 procedures. That is cutting down that waiting list by at least 6 months. Since we started our program at the Duchess, we've conducted 28 procedures. Now, think about the pace at which the public sector is able to move and relate that to the number of cases we've been able to do. Do the maths. It makes absolute sense. But we do need to get everyone involved. So our appeal, of course, is to the private sector, colleagues, to the third sector, corporate organizations. And we're getting patients from all over the country. So the gateway to this waiting list initiative, of course, is a public hospital system, where we encourage people to ask about the waiting list initiative at the public hospitals. We expect that consultants will refer into us. Okay, and we have ways in which we jointly assess the cases, means tests as well, and attempt to prioritize who needs what. It's a significant undertaking, but we are winning at it.
So it's the public hospital that determines who is referred to the Duchess?
Absolutely, because, I mean, the waiting list is in the public sector. So we have that collaboration and that communication going on all of the time.
Do
we will
people
assess
have to
the
pay
cases.
to get on the list?
So people have to pay.
Pay to get on the list?
Yes, well, what we guarantee is that people pay no more than they would have had to pay in the public sector. Okay, so, and it's done everywhere in the world. The NHS has a waiting list in which it moves patients across from the NHS into Bupa. Okay, as far as you're not charging the patients anymore, it makes no real difference. But the difference it does make is that they then have the benefit of the fantastic services and facilities you have in the public sector. Okay, and they get their procedures done in timely fashion.
I come back to that question because, and I'm sorry, maybe it's a pessimism in me that is playing up. As Alero has indicated earlier, there is no free lunch in Freetown.
Of course.
You should have waited 6 months, by which time you could be dead. But now you can have this expedited.
Yes.
And you just put my name on the list free of charge?
Free of charge? Well, it's at no additional cost to the patient. The public hospitals also want to get these patients done.
That's the hospital.
Yes.
How about the practitioners?
The practitioners? I see. You are still concerned about the fact that practitioners...
I am concerned.
Okay.
Shouldn't I be concerned?
Graft.
Shouldn't I be concerned?
About the practitioners?
Yes.
Okay. In what sense? Sorry.
I just told you, and you get it. So... Go ahead.
Well, the practitioners also want to serve their patients.
Okay.
We have a direct relationship with the hospitals as well, and we do our best to act in the interests of the patients.
Anyway,
in the interest of
always in the interest of the patient.
Okay. So that done and said, you said this waiting list is how old now?
Okay, we started working on it about a year ago. It's taken quite a lot of planning, okay, and we officially began last November.
Okay, so it's about a year.
It's about a year now.
Okay, so you're concentrating on the heart at the moment. And you say you're going to move it on from there.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
where do you intend to move it to next?
Okay. All forms of complex surgical procedures, anything and everything that we can offer at the Duchess Hospital. At the Duchess, of course, we have 5 well-equipped theatres. We have the expertise to offer complex laparoscopic surgery, for example. But we wanted to prove the concept by beginning with open heart surgery. Open heart surgery is incredibly complicated surgery, as it is. So we've stayed there for now, but we intend to move it on to complex abdominal surgery very, very soon.
Does this initiative have a terminal point? A time that it ends?
Okay, well, it is our hope, actually, that this is a long-term sustainable program. But of course, it will rely on our partnerships with the corporate sector and with charities. So, for example, last week there were 9 cases done at the Duchess, and that was a collaboration between us, LASUTH, and a charity called Save a Heart Foundation. Of course, they make their contribution in expertise, in consumables, and the important thing is that we keep the cost low for the patient. As we said, no more than they would have had to pay in the private sector.
Okay. Now, what other procedures, you talked about complex procedures, what other procedures are you hoping to get into?
Okay. So, for example, there's complex colorectal surgery for advanced cancer of the bowel. Okay, we have the facilities for that. We would hope that we would be able to move it on into that. Complex gynecological surgery as well. But as I've said, we've stayed with open heart surgery for the last few months to a year. It's working, and we're hoping that we can move it on from there.
Are you suggesting that if LASUT, for instance, suggested surgery for some form of cancer now, you would take it on?
I think it's really important. I think back to the question you asked, or what you were alluding to earlier. We would always look at the governance around the referral. First of all, you consider the patient, you consider the facilities you have, consider the point of referral. Is there something that you can do and offer to the patient that would offer a reasonable prognosis? Is this something that can reasonably be done at the Duchess? We would look at all of that in coming to a joint decision about whether we take this on. This young girl that I described, whose case I described earlier, we really needed to give a lot of thought to it. As I've said, it's never been done anywhere before. But we needed to think, well, are we giving false hope here? Is this something that, given the services and facilities we have, is this something that for which we could offer a reasonable prognosis? The joint and collaborative answer was yes, and we went ahead. So it's not a Duchess Hospital project or a LASUT project or third sector project. It really is a metaphor for how the health economy in this country needs to work together in order to bring down the cost of healthcare and move healthcare forward. So we would consider each case on its own merit, is the answer.
From your experience, is heart problem a common problem in Nigeria?
Incredibly so.
Wow.
And I think actually this is the reason we've started there. If you think about the risk factors for heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, raised cholesterol, not to talk about all of the congenital and structural heart problems, that may well be in a population like ours about 20% of the population. Absolutely. Now, the pickup rate of heart disease is going up because we are getting more and more sophisticated in our approaches. We're getting more and more sophisticated equipment. But the prevalence of disease is there. There's a shift from our previous focus on acute infectious diseases now to chronic disease. There's a huge iceberg of risk that exists there. So if you think about all of the young people who at some point have just passed on, quite a lot of that may have been heart disease. We're seeing quite a lot of young people with end-stage kidney failure, for example. Diabetes is a cardiovascular disease, so it's on the rise.
What do you think is responsible for that? 20% of the population?
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, the Afro-Caribbean population is, yes, susceptible to certain conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, that is true. The state of our healthcare system as well, chronically underfunded, does not help. So we can't sit back and simply wait for government to do it all for us. We need to take the initiative, and that really is what the waiting list initiative is about. Yes, it is tempting to sit back and be slightly cynical about it, think about the moral hazard that could come from the clinicians, but we have to do something. There is a crisis that we have on our hands here, and I think hospitals like the Duchess and others must take the lead in going ahead to try and offer solutions to this problem.
You said you also take cases from other hospitals?
Yes.
Has that initiative also started?
Well, direct referrals, or are we talking about the waiting list initiative?
No, it depends. So, you were the one that mentioned it the other time.
Yes, of course. We do receive referrals from hospitals all over the country, really, for simply because of the level of facilities and expertise that we have, and that's quite standard. But the waiting list initiative really is about us being proactive. We are creating a plan and saying to the population, well, the prevalence of heart disease is quite high. Prevalence of structural and congenital heart disease is reasonably high as well. Let's do something about it. Otherwise, these patients really do not get served. So there's a natural referral pipeline, but we're also being quite proactive about going out, seeking these patients, and building bridges with the public sector.
These referrals that you receive from other hospitals, if they're not on the waiting list initiative, means that they're probably not going to get the same kind of bail that those on this list get, right?
Well, referrals from other hospitals. Okay, well, I mean, the waiting list initiative, of course, is supported by us, public hospitals, as well as corporate organizations, and we're actively seeking that funding and that support, simply because this is a group of patients that is particularly vulnerable. They have diseases and conditions that only a small fraction of the resources in the healthcare sector can serve. So if we're not proactive about that, there really is a big problem waiting for us. I mean, think about this 12-year-old who's just benefited from incredibly complex surgery. Without an initiative like this, it really would have been difficult to help her.
Well, all we can say now is Dr. Tokunbo Shitabe and Duchess Hospital, well done for helping Nigerians between you and LASUTH. And we know and we remember that when Babatunde Fashola was the governor of Lagos State, LASUTH broke fresh grounds in many areas, and it looks like they are still breaking fresh grounds. We wish you all the best, and we say more grease to your elbows.
Thank you very much.
We hope that by coming on this program today, you'll get more corporate organizations who are willing to partner with you in this life-saving work that you're doing.
That certainly is the hope. Thank you very much, Lara.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Dr. Tokunbo Shitabe, Chief Executive Officer, Duchess International Hospital, Ikeja. Sunrise will return in just a moment with another interesting conversation. Do stay with us.